Okay.
You have copies of this?
Yeah, I gave everybody copies. Yeah, okay, so we're rolling. All right, we're, yeah, the
While ago.
packets. The packets, the original packets had all the items in it.
Here, I have it here, okay.
No, I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think he's talking about the spreadsheet, right, breakdown.
Yeah, that was it. Everybody got the original packet, so we'll, I can make.
Yes.
You done with this?
Yeah.
Brian, you can go on. All right, so, right now, just for purpose of the calendar, it's Wednesday, the 2nd of March. On tap is a police department, all facets. And after today, next Monday, we'll start to talk about the salary piece of this and where we're going with health insurance, state retirement, some of the other expenses that are not necessarily directly related, like insurance and so on. And we'll populate, some of that. My goal is for next Monday to have the spreadsheet with the tenant budget and revenues populated, as well as the bond and the debt. Just for, let the board know, today we closed on the ban and the bond, serial bond for the A fund. So that money was received, wired today. Tomorrow we'll be paying off the 1.5-ish ban from last year. Again, rates were not as good this year as last year, but that's obviously because of what's going on in the economy, but they're still pretty darn low for today's market. So if anybody has any questions about the bonds, that's going to, I'll be glad to go over that. Also, I think one of the board members asked about the class accounts last time. Brian, was that you? Okay, so I have a copy of the updated class accounts, so I'll pass that around so all board members can look at that as we proceed through. This is up to date of where we are with what's technically our reserve funds for the village. Okay, and that's all the cleanup stuff I have. Again, you have version B, police department. That's going to be page 5. And that includes central communications. So there's basically everything on page 5 that's police is there in those columns. And then traffic control is on page 6, which is a smaller item. Okay, Mayor, so
Ken, you wanna go through your,
What do you want to tackle first?
why don't you start with contractual?
With which one? Are we central communications or police department?
Please.
police, okay.
I don't know if everybody, see Charlie has her copy from last year, so she's comparing notes. I don't know if everybody has a copy of last year's, so.
Well, that's what I was saying, I was talking to Ed.
Line by line.
What we wanna do from the future with all department heads is have at least last year's and this year's when you do it. And we didn't ask that before, so that's why it's not, but from now on in the future, last year, this year, so we compare. When you come down to, when you say, well, the reason why this is a $5,000 difference is because, rather than just going right down to the bottom line and saying, well, there's a $15,000 difference, where did it happen?
All right, so,
Do you have both?
no,
Okay.
I could pull last year's. Pull last year's, make copies.
Charlie has it, so just, we'll go with you, Charlie.
Okay.
nice. So Charlie can confirm with me, so on the oxygen, if we're on police contractual,
Wait a second, this, oh, yeah,
is that 15, 16 on the top?
bear with me, I think what is in this book, it may be harder for me to tell because I hand wrote in against,
have this thing like this, 15, 16?
From last year?
I've
Yeah,
got
in the file.
2013.
All right. Just give me yours for that. You guys have some compare. I'll make some copies.
Sorry, thank you.
15, 16.
Yeah, that's in hand scratching.
And certainly if I would have been asked, I would have brought it.
I know, that's why I'm not, we're good. He's gonna make a couple copies so we can compare. Why don't you just go through, any of the major changes you have, in your budget from last year to this year, as far as, like I'm seeing, there's a $16,000 jump in one area, $4,000 jump in another area. Any major components that you basically, see, just so we're on the same page also, while we're going
You're
through
probably looking
it?
at the fuel as one of the
Okay.
big jumps, and that's a minus. And that's because of the fluctuation with the price of fuel. Last year, for 9,000 gallons, we put a figure of $3.50 per gallon. Of course, we get it a little bit cheaper at state bid pricing, but I can't control the market, so I don't know what it's gonna be on any given year. It can shoot up to $4. So, looking at the trends and seeing where we're at with the market, and when Ed gets back, he can confirm this. We lowered the $3.50 to $3 a gallon. Now, it's my hope that the price of a gallon of gasoline will not go over $2.75, but I don't control the market. So that's why you see a big reduction in the fuel price. It used to be 32 or 33, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, and now it's 27. So that's a big swing. There was an increase with the radio lease, and that is directly related to the reduction of the amount of money that we get from Entergy. I'm in negotiations with them with the assistance of Assemblyman Scoofus's office to raise the amount that they provide us each year back to the original numbers that they were 2 years ago, which was $28,000 change. Now currently it's gonna be $15,000, so we need to up that amount, so that's what I'm working on. Currently, this obviously is planning in the worst case scenario that Entergy doesn't come through for whatever reasons, we'll be able to pay for our radio equipment. And that's all the radios. Because they're still providing us $15,000 regardless. And as far as contractual, that's the two biggest swings. Everything else is very minimal, and you can see what the bottom line is. And Charlie, you look at last year, we were at,
Well, I'm looking at 03 to,
well, that's,
or
that's
13 to
a whole
14.
Okay,
um,
so there is a little increase there on the overall number. Actually, I can.
wait, I may have it.
That's one more, sorry. And that's the 10,000.
Was it 900,450?
Ken, there was a $7,000 jump. He's gonna come up with it, and we're just gonna go quick line by line, but we'll go back to central communications, that's the first thing on the spreadsheet. Central
We're gonna
communications.
do away with contractual now?
Oh, we're
I
bouncing
just-
around.
I just wanna go back to contractual while I'm waiting on Ed. Then we can go down the list.
We are on contractual for police.
No, central communication.
Oh.
It's at the top of the police, that's why. On the spreadsheet that everybody has. Do you have a copy
No, I have a
of the
copy.
general fund?
I thought we were starting on police contractual.
I think we were, but.
We were.
So now you wanna jump to communication?
Yeah, only because I'd rather have the, both years from Ed to keep going through the police.
Okay.
There was a $7,000 jump in central communications salary.
Let me just bear with me a second. So I can catch up. We're jumping.
That's why this is all last year.
Thank you.
And then, Brian's do the addition.
I'm gonna hand out to the board, since we're gonna talk about,
This is this year, you do it. What's that? This year's?
since we're gonna discuss communications, I think it's important to discuss, I know there's been talk about looking into doing away with one of the shifts, the overnight shifts.
But that's not, we don't want that included in your, that's a possibility, and that's something being looked into, that, we can't figure that into the budget. The budget's gotta be set for what we have now.
Okay. So you
Okay.
wanna move to communications?
Central communication salary.
Okay. Did I get a copy of last year? Did you make me a copy? Or do I share it?
Oh, I thought you had it. Here, just take mine.
Sure.
I don't need
You
it.
sure?
Yeah.
On the general fund spreadsheet, under central communication, there's a $7,000 jump. I'm just
I had an extra.
wondering why.
That's because the numbers had changed since the last fiscal year. There was a contract settled, so the salaries went up. And there's an anticipation for increases in the future, so that's always factored in. That's probably where the bulk of it comes from. And generally, what we did last year was, whatever that increase was, that was factored, that was removed from this sheet and put into, I guess, general,
Well, no, and I would put it in general.
or wherever it goes.
Right, that's why, that's huge for when those numbers come out to the public and they're like, why is there a $7,000 jump?
Mhm.
That action needs to be taken out. The anticipation for the settled contract, that needs to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, should be in a separate line, not in your just general salary line.
It really depends on how the board wants to do it.
Yeah, when it does the tentative, he does take it out, and it reflects that.
What no, what
And the
number
public
is
hasn't
it?
even seen a tentative yet, so.
That's what all I see is this, that's why I'm saying,
Are
So
you
you're saying that it does
2%
happen?
increase? Is that what your,
Yeah.
is that what
Yeah,
the
we do
number
that
is?
every year.
2 year?
Every year.
2%? Okay.
So we hope that, and I'm sure the PBA would agree, that we'll settle for 0.5%. So we're ahead.
we're not doing contracts tonight. But, so what you're saying is, you have the increases for.
Possible increases factored in, yes.
Right, okay.
That's where you're seeing that jump.
But you're saying there's two increases. There's the regular increase and a possible increase
When we
on
did,
settlement?
when we did the budget last year, there was no contract set.
Right,
Now there's a set, so that changed the numbers a little bit.
right.
So that is reflected in here. So that would account for a small portion of that 7,000 that you're looking
Right, that's what I'm concerned about. It will account for a small portion of 7,000. 2% of,
148,000.
Yeah. central communication, is that,
Yeah, that's
7%, does that cover the,
148.
that covers it? 7,000, standard?
Um.
I'm good with it,
Two-
if that's
2%
what it
of-
is.
2% of 150,000 is 3,000.
Okay.
at. And then you got little
So
increases, part-time salaries went up a little bit, so. It's a minimal change.
Well, no, it's actually double the change, that's why I'm saying it. 2% of 150 will be 3,000.
And
It's
but you're
seven.
arguing at 7,000, you're concerned about the $7,000.
I'm just going, we're just going line by
Well,
line.
There's other stuff probably in there, it's probably not just the salary.
I'm just asking, so that we know,
Okay.
that's all. Okay, but you're saying you're gonna break that out?
Yeah,
It's
well,
key to the
it
public that they
really-
know what
what I need
what
to
the
do
number
is,
is.
I need to do is to talk to the negotiation group to find out what we're looking and where we are. Board can do one of two things, you can put in a percentage of increase. I don't recommend that by virtue of the direct number, because then you're telegraphing what you'd be willing to settle on. So what you typically can do is you can put 0 and then put aside some funding in a contingency
That's
to
what,
cover,
Plus the
but not,
contract.
not related to any percentage.
right, and that's what we
Just so-
talked about, so that
Right.
when these people, when the contracts finally
Yeah,
do it, that we're not behind the 8 ball. We need to have that money ready,
yeah.
so that it's not, so that we wanna settle a contract, it's there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but again, it's, there's many ways that this can be done, there's no, there's no foolproof way. It really depends on what the board wants to do as far as, set asides. There are some boards that set nothing aside, and then, they deal with it when it comes up.
No, I mean, things like retro pay and the percentage.
But,
increase,
some
which we don't
contracts,
know
I'll tell you, there's
yet,
some
so
contracts out there that, let's say, are 2-3 years expired, 0 in the year that you're agreeing, you get a decent percentage, and then maybe the next year there's something there. So a lot of the past years, after the Taylor, after the Triborough agreement, the the 2% or whatever it is for that first year, then everything else after that, some negotiations, anything in the past, it's only what's in the present that's determined to be the
How
number.
far out is the police? Are they a couple of years, 2 or 3 years?
We're on 1 year out.
1 year out?
Well, we're working on the full year now.
What'd you get for the first year out? 2%? Was that what the tribal gave them?
The settlement,
What'd you get the
the
year prior to
last
that?
year was 2.5, it went 2.5.
Okay.
So we're, listen, and I explain this every year, I'm putting a number on it, and I don't know what it's, I'm hoping that it's not gonna be more than 2. Has there been years when it's been more? Yes. And we witnessed it last year where we got a 2.5. Was it a big jump? No. But by putting that number on, it gives you something to put, I don't care if you put it in your general fund, reserve, wherever you put it. But it also helps keep the amount that's on the spreadsheet relevant, because if we just keep it stagnant, when you settle, you might have a little bit off to the side in this other account, but now my salaries that I pin myself to are stagnant, how do we make up for that increase? We have to come up with more money.
Yeah, and look, this could be acceptable to the board or some other version, you guys really have to determine what works for you. But I do caution, when you put a percentage down, you're telegraphing that that's what you're willing to agree to. So that might not be a good bargaining position to be in.
Okay, we have both last year's and this year, so we're just gonna keep going on where we are with Essential Communications, the first thing on the spreadsheet. So, Ken, you just wanna go down from there?
Make sure I got everything. So we're gonna stick on salary. Or we're gonna move up to contractual.
I think you guys probably wanna do contractual,
Yeah.
and then determine how you wanna handle salaries. Do you wanna baseline them and then put something away for, potential settlement, or some other variant of that? And to be honest with you, I would discuss salaries in executive session, because it's a contractual issue.
Okay, so are we all on the same page now? Communications, contractual, we have 15, 16 in front of us, and 16 and 17? All right, I'll go line by line. So uniform allowance did not change. That's because the projections that I laid out, we felt right where we needed to be. So there was no change there. There was a slight increase to the uniform replacement, and that's just to keep up with the trends that we've been dealing with. We've had turnover, and the cost of things have been going up. So it's a small increase. The phone, again, to keep us at pace with what we're paying yearly, there was a small increase. Same with our dictaphone system. Office supplies, small increase.
The dictaphone, is it dictaphone brand or,
Yeah, that's what it was called years ago. It's now
Yeah.
Mirror 4.
Okay. I was gonna say that's
But-
an old system.
It's hybrided into something else. It's the same thing. It's our recorder system.
okay.
So, and we do have the most updated equipment now. We just got into a new contract with them this year, so, or late last year. Office supplies, again, these are just minimal increases just to keep up with the cost of items. Impact, there was an increase. They're also talking about, the county is in discussion with maybe trying to renegotiate with Impact, or even going into an entirely new system, which I hope they don't do that, because then they're going to scrounge up for some money. So, there's a minimal increase there. Computer repair, same thing. Radio lease, that was where I had to make the adjustment, what I was just talking about with Entergy. I don't know how much, at a minimum, we're gonna get 15 grand, but this is anticipating that that's all they're gonna give us. If they give us more, then we're in a good position. So right now, I can only project what I know. And the other two items, janitorial miscellaneous, very minimal swings there, again, just to keep up with the cost of stuff. So there was a slight, a little less than $4,000 increase on the contractual line. Equipment, no change, 2 high-back chairs. The grand total is 267,282, last year's was 259,175. Again, contractual could go down just slightly if we get more assistance from Entergy. Questions?
Can a computer repair, is that like a lease or is that just estimated of what it's gonna
That's
cost?
when they- That is we have an account with Clip, and it's limited to X amount of work. So anything above that falls under the department.
Okay.
So it's meant mostly for labor.
Got it.
So, you know, IT, it can go south.
No, no, no.
I think they get, I
Time, so.
think you get 810 hours or something like that.
I'm not sure, but just so the board knows, right now, Fred Lewis is working on upgrading our server, because we got the server a few years back, and we had to downgrade it. It was server 2008, and to be compatible with one of our systems, we had to downgrade it to 2003. So they're gonna have to come in and upgrade it back up to 2008, which is gonna cost a little bit. So, but we're good with, we got money to cover it. We don't have to buy any software or anything, because we already have it. So, but I don't wanna be cut short with the IT stuff, so this is a small amount.
You know, I was just wondering.
That's fine.
Keep going.
I covered everything on the communications page there, equipment, there was no change.
Mhm.
What about the vehicle? What's your position?
I don't think, we're still working on communications, we jumping to another page?
No,
I thought we were just.
Is there more on
contractual.
communications?
we're on
He's doing
communications.
contractual.
No, that,
That's what
All right,
that's what I was actually looking
all right.
at. No, keep going, Tim.
to what page?
Now, you just finished central communication, right? So, police department. Equipment contraction.
You wanna jump to equipment first?
Yes.
For 2 straight budgets, I've requested a vehicle for the police department, and that's because of a depleting fleet. Every year, because of budget constraints, I guess we cut the vehicle out. Currently, we have 4 vehicles that have over 100,000 miles on them. Remember, life expectancy of a police car is normally 5 years, and that's when you're giving them a lot of TLC to take care of.
What years are they?
The oldest is 2002, but it's an unmarked, so it's not as critical as a marked car, patrol car. I'll just list the marked cars, they are the most critical. The oldest one, we have 2007. It's 4 years over a 5-year capital plan.
Do you have the miles on that one?
1004, 365.
Yeah.
We got, the next would be 2 2008 Durangos. One has 111,423 miles, and the other has 106,400. Again, they've gone 3 years over their 5-year life expectancy, which, with the 5-year capital plan expired.
It's a lot of miles.
So, I'm glad the DPW supervisor's here. I mean, he just came back on board, and I'm glad to have him back on board, and he can attest to some of the conditions of the vehicles. I got one that sounds like a tank when it's driving. It's not because of a lack of maintenance or it's being driven too hard, it's just old. It's seen its day. So, the first item I have on the equipment line is for a new vehicle.
What do we have in reserve? 12?
10 plus you have an option in the budget to put another 10 before the end of this fiscal year.
Okay.
So you'll have 20 and then whatever you want to fund for next year.
So 20 towards this year's budget for this particular car?
You have funding to put 10,000 in this year. And then depending on what you budget for next year, you'd have the ability to put another 10. So you have essentially 20 to pull from out of the reserve.
we're in a situation right now where we really need, critically need 3. We really need 2. So to pull from reserves to cover just 1, I don't think is in our best interest.
Ken, on this memo here from last year, you have newer cars here. I don't know if that's, there's your car, it's 13, you have a 2011 Ford.
Oh, I didn't finish, yes. You're
Okay.
right, You're right.
Yeah, please keep going.
So the 2013 is my car, it's an unmarked car. The 2002 is another unmarked car. But the other patrol vehicles that we have other than the, I think I stopped at the 2008s, I'm sorry.
Right.
Then we have a 2011, so that's right at its 5-year mark. It only has 84,000, but that's usually when you should be looking to get rid of it. It might even have a little better resale value at 84,000 as opposed to 100. And then we have a 2012, which is already up to 60,000 miles, 307, and it has about 1 year left on it. And the problem I've been facing, and I explained it to the board last year, I went $14,000 over vehicle maintenance. And you can attribute that to having a very poor fleet, because they're spending more time getting fixed, and when they're down, your other horses have to work a little harder. So the 2012 vehicle, I'm surprised that the mileage had gotten up as fast as it did, but it's picking up the workload. Same with the 2011. That car is, it hit the 5-year mark, but they're hard years, hard miles.
Any questions on vehicles?
So the total number in the fleet is 7 or?
5 marked units and 2 unmarked units.
And 2, this one, these are the.
Yeah, these were unmarked.
I got it here, I got it here.
Ken, 2011 and 12, what cars are they?
Crown Vics.
And the 07, 08, 08 are Durango?
The 208s are Durangos, and the 2007's a Crown Vic. The 2002 is a Crown Vic, and the 2013 is a Ford Interceptor.
How many miles you have, Ken?
10,406. At this pace, this car lasts me 50 years.
Just explain more about when you have budget. That's 4-wheel drive?
All the Ford products are now all-wheel drive,
And
which is good, because back in the day when they bought the Durangos, it was, to deal with the winter and the hills and the terrain. And that's another concern that I have, is the Durangos, not only are they old, in the winter months, they're running 24/7, which is not good on any vehicle. I don't care what the make or model is.
is the Ford Explorer the vehicle currently on the state bid?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't buy any vehicles that aren't in state bid. So you have the Explorer, you have the Interceptor, which is the police version of the Taurus.
Explorer's out now, or the Interceptor's also. There's 2 different packages, Explorer and Interceptor, and regular, civilian junk. Sorry.
One of the things you wanna start thinking about is, because again, it hasn't happened, and now that you have reserve fund, you have the ability to start programming buying of vehicles.
Right.
But you're a little bit, your back's against the wall a little bit, because some of this stuff is old, and there weren't really, funds, provisions.
Just on a little side note, my total overall budget for police communications and everything is $4,000 less than last year, and that's including buying a new vehicle. Well, I understand the challenges. I mean, I've been,
Have we pulled that off?
well, I'm gonna explain when we get to the police.
Sweet
salaries.
George,
There's
let's
some
get
other
there.
things I wanna bring up, but I'm just, that aside, even if we weren't there, I'm glad Ed said something. We're, you can kick the can down the road, and now our backs are against the wall. And I
We
understand the
actually,
challenges.
well, we haven't kicked the can. Every year that we've been here, we put money aside, and that hadn't happened in the past. That was the problem.
No, we've always put money aside for.
Oh, we established reserve funds.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the problem is you can put money aside, but if it doesn't get used, it goes into fund balance. If it's not caught, it essentially becomes fund balance. So unless you earmark specifically money in a reserve fund for a police vehicle, there's no necessarily controls that that money can't be spent on something else. And that becomes.
Oh, I don't recall the fund balance ever going down to zero.
It
So,
hasn't, it hasn't,
But
I've been asking for a police vehicle, this will be the third straight year.
you know.
And-
And we put money aside each year.
Absolutely.
That's why I would think
Before
we
that.
would get one this year.
So whatever's happening to the money that's been set aside, and this has been going on for years, I don't keep count of that.
Well, previously, it went into
You need
a
to.
giant pot. Since I've been on the board, the end of the year, it's put in a reserve fund that is specifically earmarked for vehicles,
Right.
so it can't be touched.
Ken,
That's not what Ed
the
just said.
statement you just
Yeah,
made of
no.
your, yeah, it did.
So
That's
it is
exactly what
now
you mean.
going
It's been for the last 3
You
That's
years,
what
have
we're doing.
you have
Which did not
$20,000 earmarked just for police car reserve.
not
And
counting
it
this
can't,
budget.
can't be spent on anything else.
The other statement you made
Wait.
is, when you say you don't know where it's going, you have to know where it's going.
All right, back up, so you're saying that we have, for police, we have 20?
You have 10 right now, the board has to resolve to put another 10 in. They do have the budget funding for it. So at the end of this fiscal year,
For this past year,
Yeah,
another
correct.
10, so it'll be
the end-
28.
the end, basically by April 30th, you will have $20,000. If the board resolves, which I'm assuming they will, you'll have $20,000 in the reserve for a vehicle.
Okay, what year was the reserve? The
Started
actual reserve, yeah.
last year. Last year was the first donation. This year will be the second.
The budget before this one.
Yeah.
Was last
15,
year.
16, the one we're on now.
No, 14, 15 was the first year, 15, 16 is the second year.
And then 16, 17 will be the third year.
That would give us 30.
If the board in this budget sets
Money-
aside $10,000 in the reserve, then that will be $30,000 per vehicle. And the board's doing this for TPW,
I
fire
find
department.
that-
But these are legal reserve funds, actually, just to,
No, I appreciate that, Ed, I just, at first I thought, I heard 10 to 12, then 20, but now, for clarification, so 2014, 15, we put 10, and then for this current year, another 10, and then 16, 17 is to be determined. But right now,
Hopefully not.
we're sitting here at 10, at 20.
We're trying to do 10 a year, so how often do you need a car? Almost every year?
Oh.
Or- I mean,
At this,
Well,
at
this
this
rate-
point,
At this rate, yeah, now we have to build up the fleet again, and yeah, in a perfect world, maybe you can skip a year and build that, get a little bit into your vehicle reserve, so instead of budgeting, you use a vehicle reserve. I also suggested, and I don't know how the board feels about it this year, I know last year everybody was, vehicle maintenance. If I put $20,000 aside for vehicle maintenance, and we use 5,000, we should take the 15,000 that we did use in vehicle maintenance and also add that to vehicle reserve. Is that something that we can legitimately do?
the budget, there'd have to be a budget adjustment, though.
Okay,
The board
but-
could, you could make that recommendation, and the board could take action on it if they chose to do it, yeah. So if you manage your budget really well and save money on the maintenance side, and you're like, look, I did a great job saving money, can you please earmark this savings toward a new vehicle? Just like, kind of what DPW might do this year with a truck that they're looking for, because we've had such a light snow year. They might have a residual of about $60,000 on snow removal that's not gonna get spent. So, the board might be able to take that, if they decide to do that, take that money, earmark it toward the purchase of the truck, because that money won't get spent this year, provided we don't get any other snowstorms.
with the cap the way it is, if we didn't have a light year, if we had a heavy year, the truck would almost be impossible to get.
Yeah.
So we hopefully will be lucky through the rest of the year. You made a statement of the fact you're $4,000 less. That's what we're looking for all department heads. Because of that, you just made a statement of, can we pull this to this? As Ed said, any fund can be transferred for the most part to another fund. This is where we want our department heads to get more interactive with it, where you're looking through the budget and going, this is never spent ever. It's only 2,000, but that 2,000 can add to this 3,000, this 10,000, I have another 15,000. We're looking for you to shift that money. We're looking, because we can't. We're not looking at your entire budget year round. That's the department head's job to go in and go, like Gary in the beginning, as soon as he got here, he said, I don't need this $15,000 for this piece of equipment, but don't let it go. hold on to that 15, because I'm gonna need it somewhere else. And that's what we're looking for. If you're looking for, there's an area where you need help, but there's an area that you're really being stringent, and that's what we're looking for our department heads. Saving money, I went out of my way, I got a grant from Entergy, so I'm looking for you guys to help me out here. That's what we're looking for. The department heads that are doing more to save and bring in money, the board is much more easier to help out, shift things around and make things happen. Which you're consistently getting money from Entergy. Hopefully you'll get that extra 5. And you're telling us now you're 4,000 low. That's great. So, but as to your question, if you find 3 or 4 other pieces that you are heavy on, first of all, check the last 3 years. Have you always been heavy? Then we need to reduce that budget. But for this year, there's $15,000 in it. Let's get that over to the vehicle so we can get our fleet back where it needs to be.
So just for the record, there's not 15, but
Ish,
use that
whatever.
as an example.
That's fine.
But if you had, Ken, if you had a situation where, like the TPW, where we had a light snow month and there's a lot of money that's not gonna be spent out of the snow budget, I think it'd be very reasonable to make a case, hey, you know, we really managed this account well, we got, Mother Nature helped us out also. Instead of this money all going to fund balance, we have a need in the vehicle, could you please consider maybe upping a contribution because of the good job that we did with the budget to be able to buy another piece of equipment? I think that incentive I think that's a good idea. So if you have that situation, that probably would be a good thing to consider.
Just so you're aware, talking about the vehicles, I've always believed there should be a new vehicle every year within the province, and just.
Sir, it's not DPW's turn.
For information, one of the 2008 Durangos is out of service right now, and I've gone 4 different channels for aftermarket and through Chrysler, and the best answer that I got at the end of the day was the part could be anywhere up to a year before we get it. So we actually ordered the part 2 avenues now. And that car can just sit there. It can't be used because it has to do with braking and steering.
What part is to carry this, that
It's what they
little
call
backlog?
a clock spring in the steering column.
Clock
And
screen.
it tells the computer whether the driver's turning the car as much as the car is turning, so it adjusts the brakes on and off.
All oversteer and
So,
stuff like that?
yeah, so this car can't be used, and that's the best scenario. Aftermarket, I had Kevin down at Napa, went 4 different avenues, and we went 2 different Chrysler dealers to make sure we weren't getting a line. And neither one will confirm, I'll have a part for you in a month, 2 months. The best scenario we got could be up to a year, and that car is sitting there, and that's actually the better of the 2 2008 Durangos. But this is what happens when the stagecoaches and the horses are overly tired.
Is a salvage steering column available?
You can't, what happens with, to make it simple, it's like you take the clock off your mantle and take it apart and the spring goes boom.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you take the steering wheel off the car. You
Well,
can't-
how does the spring go?
You can't steal one of these parts used out of a car.
Oh, okay.
If it was that simple,
You
a
would've
lot
done
of
it.
people would have done it.
Would've done it already.
So basically the answer is, you know, we'll work together to get it done. Okay, moving on.
You know, how does the board want to handle vehicles, police vehicles going forward?
That's what we'll discuss. Go ahead, Ken.
So the lettering is standard. You get a car, you gotta letter it. And that price hasn't changed from the last year when I requested the lettering to be done. Next under that was the ballistic vest. I have not closed out the reimbursements yet, so, but we do need house money to play with, so, which is to use to buy the vest. And then we'll probably get all of that back, because we get both federal and state reimbursements, so.
And that's been happening.
Yes, and we're going to, at the end of all this, we should be able to assure that everybody not only has a vest, but will have a vest that's not expired. And I've already explained last year and the year before, it's a 5-year shelf life on the vest.
And we can only get 6 vests reimbursed at a time?
No, but the more we're gonna buy, we're gonna need to budget more for it. And the money's not, it's not an unlimited pool of money, so I can't.
That's what I'm saying. if we went for 8 vests or 10 vests, would we get reimbursed for 10 vests?
Right now, yes. But the state will only reimburse for new hires.
Okay.
It's the federal money that we can use for anybody, so
Okay.
that's. So,
Well, my only thing with that is, like we're doing with some of the lawn care, you know, again, we don't know how long that program's gonna last, and how long the federal, you don't see it stopping? I'm wondering, do we need to get would you need the best for these guys now? Are we short now?
we're
You're
not
saying-
short.
You're saying the 6 will bring us pretty
We're now-
much,
We're now working on, everyone has a vest, we're now working on, let's get rid of the old vest.
correct,
So,
all right,
I think at this pace, I mean, listen, we budget 3684, we spend it, we get it back, well, then we got another 3684 that we budget for, we can spend that. So that would get us 12 vests.
right, that's another line you need to keep an eye on, just like we're doing with the lawn maintenance. Well, when that lawn maintenance gets reimbursed from the county, we're actually hopefully create a line for that, so we're not drawing from the budget. So now, your line item, when you get reimbursed items, we wanna create an income line item for that.
We have a revenue line, so.
Right, so you have a revenue line for the vests.
No, there's.
So we're talking about specifically for the vest.
Right.
If you get it reimbursed from the vest, it should go into a fund for vests.
That way, that just automatically,
We cannot take it anywhere else.
that's what I'm talking about, so that way you know your vests are secured.
Well, remember I had asked you that last year, if we could set up that reserve
Yeah, but
for
it's-
specific items like that?
You guys have to understand, part of your revenue setup is expectation of some of this money.
Right.
Okay, so on the revenue side, it's already captured. All right, so if there's an understanding that 5,000 is gonna come in for vests, there's a revenue line already assuming that
That's what we're-
5,000
okay,
coming in.
that's what we're making sure.
So there's no ability to earmark anything unless it's something that comes up after. Let's say mid-year, a grant opportunity comes up that wasn't a standard one, that would become an additional revenue line, and that would allow you to then increase your expense line. But anything that's a normal recurring revenue is already factored into the budget.
The biggest thing for recurring revenue as far as the department head is to be able to, just to make that notation of, this actually isn't coming out of, we're not dealing with new taxpayer money. This is from last year, it was reimbursed, so you're not even dealing with that. Even though it did come out of the revenue stream, we have to pull it from the budget. This way we know, you know, we're not using new tax dollars. Keep,
And under that, then moving on to radar units, we need 2 more radar units. They're about $2,000 a piece, so.
how many do we have total?
We have 4 now, and 2 of them really have seen their day.
So we only need 4 total, but you're replacing 2?
We have 5 more vehicles, but we do have a handheld one, so it's interchangeable.
So what I'm saying, are we replacing 2, or are we adding, so now we'll have 6?
Well, I'd like to replace 2,
Okay.
because they've seen their day. So, obviously with the vehicle put in there, that's going to increase the amount that we were approved last year. Now, that's the biggest swing, and then the 4,000 for the radar, you can see we didn't have that the previous year. Last year's total equipment was, with the vehicle and everything, was 47,274, this year, 44,434. That's because last year we bought Glock pistols, and
Do we get reimbursed at all from Entergy for that?
Yeah, I thought we were looking for a reimbursement on the Glocks, did we not get reimbursed for those?
they, well, I'm fighting just to keep the regular funding that they give us.
So they deny,
They gave
deny
us
the
that,
same?
yeah.
Okay.
So that's it on police equipment.
Okay. Reserve fund? You know about that?
Totally.
Okay, well,
Well, right now you have 10,000 in your requested, so you gotta determine if you want to move it to the tentative.
right,
My recommendation is that you keep the same outlay for reserve funds that you did last year, so all the items that on recurring need get it. And then again, when we get to our final numbers with the tentative, then you can, you know, reserve funds is an area, reserve funds contingency are gonna be areas you're gonna have to consider making adjustments to. But again, just remember, you know, you don't have the 200,000 in fund balance to draw from, and you have zero ability to increase the tax rate because of the tax cap. So essentially, the budget's 200,000 below last year, bottom line. Now, you, as I mentioned, you're gonna get some benefit that Web Lane is done, that bond is done. There's some other savings that you'll get from the rest of the, this year's work, but then you have overtime days that are over budget in some areas that you're gonna have to make up for.
Okay.
Is one of those
On
areas,
street-
can I ask something, is one of those areas the police department?
Yes,
So I'd like to talk about that,
yes.
since we're bringing it up.
Well, generalized statement's fine, but if you're gonna talk about specific numbers, you should be exact.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, my concern is, 2 years ago, we created this overtime line. My first question is going to be, who determined the amount for the overtime line?
The board.
Last year it was $33,000. This year it was reduced to 20, but, so the board
Yeah,
decided?
it's essentially, the way it works is that if your overtime runs more than the cost of hiring a new officer or a couple part-time officers, then you should be hiring that person and not running overtime. That's a rule of thumb. Now, certainly, boards can, if they have funds to be able to pay out higher overtime rates, they can do that. If they don't, they need to be looking at manpower, because typically, if you're running overtime rates more than it costs of hiring somebody, you're not as efficient.
And what are you basing this
Costing
on?
more money.
Like clerks in Village Hall, or emergency services, law enforcement, police?
I don't understand the question.
I don't understand the rationale. So you're saying that was set based on the need to possibly having to hire another employee?
The overtime rate is set on an understanding that it is below the cost.
I'm just trying to wrap my mind
Yeah,
around,
it's
where did the
below the-
$33,000 figure come from?
Well, it essentially, the board decided a 5% factor on the overall payroll. That's the number. It's a 5% factor on the overall payroll.
Right, and that's my concern. So, when that number came out, I was very alarmed, because I just knew that number didn't make any sense whatsoever to anything. So, I think I provided this graph, if you would just take one and pass it down to the board. So, but I was trying to understand, well, where are we getting these numbers from? So I went back to 2008, 2009 budget. And as you'll see on the graph, the number was $93,000. So that's high, and I get that. Then it jumped up in the 2009, 2010 fiscal year to 126,000. These are high numbers, they're astronomical. So of course, when I'm seeing numbers like that, I'm a little alarmed. Then in 2010, 11, it went down to 102, and then jumped back up to 116. So I took over right after that fiscal year, and it went down to $79,567. And then the year after that, it went down to $60,226. Now, as you'll see, I don't have 15-14, or I'm sorry, 15-16, because that was the first year we actually put this number of $33,000 as a projected, this is what overtime is gonna be, when clearly the past amounts were way above that. Never was there a discussion, hey, let's hire more full-time, let's hire more part-time. I don't think hiring more employees is going to reduce that number.
What's the correlation between those hired, 126 and 33?
What's the correlation?
Yeah.
How did you get from 116 to 79? In a
Look, I
year?
guess it's emergency services. I cannot predict 207C cases. I cannot predict emergencies such as hurricanes or any emergency. I can't predict people or Mother Nature. Those are two things I do not have the luxury to project.
So
So,
$37,000 was all because of emergencies?
Excuse me?
$37,000 was all because
It
of
was for
emergencies, Mother
everything,
Nature?
covering shifts,
Okay, well,
everything,
that's
so when
what-
I did that,
that's
my,
what-
There's a bigger
talk about
thing,
it.
at this point in the time, tax cap kicked in.
Yeah, but I
So nobody
understand
had
we're talking about
unlimited budgets
emergencies,
anymore.
but there's no way there's almost
Yeah,
$40,000
well,
of
but
Mother
obviously,
Nature events.
obviously, looking at this graph, what happened is that there was more attention paid to your costs. Okay, bottom line, there's more attention paid to the costs. To be able to go from 126 to 79 in 3 years, that's a cost structure.
so the cost was, my point I'm getting at, the cost is going down. So when I prepared the budget for 14-15, I came up to, we're gonna need about $65,000 to cover overtime. That's everything, not just emergency, everything. And of course, at $33,000, we ran out of money.
Yeah, 5% of the overall budget.
Right, but Ed's, Ken's saying that he gave us
Well,
a different number.
he turns one in on his submittal.
Okay.
Okay, but those are the estimates that he's assuming he's gonna have in addition. And to his point, you do have an issue because of 207C.
Yeah.
Because that pops at least 75,000 to your budget, and you don't necessarily get any services for it. So that,
You're forced to cover those spots here.
So the base case scenario, so my projection, looking at the data, looking at my budget, this spreadsheet, I knew I need about $65,000. So to make $33,000 the mark didn't make sense. Now, if we're gonna use that rationale, at the same year, and I hate to bring other departments into it, because I'm not gonna criticize other departments, because I'm sure there's a need. Just for snow removal, 44,000 was adopted. And I know that's more than 5% of their salary, so for 3 months, 4 months out of the year, we're gonna budget for emergencies or Mother Nature, $44,000, but the police is gonna be 33, hold on, Ed. And then for this year, we're gonna lower it to 28,000, the current year.
it's not, they're completely unrelated scenarios.
Well, why do they need 44 and I only need 33?
No,
I'm trying to figure
because
out.
the 44,000 is an estimate based on last 5 years' worth of experience on overtime, okay?
I got that right here.
But Ken, you just proved by this graph that you were able to shave almost $60,000 in 3 years, okay? So what does that tell you?
That I don't need 33, I know I need
No,
at
it
least
tells
60
you
right
that
now.
there were certainly opportunities that came up to be able to get the number down. Now, that's good.
What opportunities, Ed? All the factors that we don't have control of?
Obviously, from 126 to 79, something happened, and as Anthony's saying, it wasn't emergencies.
Well, I'm gonna tell
Ken,
you
do
what
you,
happened.
do you have 14-15? The numbers for 14-15?
I think you said 65.
60,
No,
well,
I
he's got on
had
his-
projected I would need about 65. Now, that was the year it went down to 33, and when we hit 33, not even midway through the year, because it made sense, we're midway through the year, I needed 65, he had 33. I got pulled into your office, and we were told not to use overtime to cover shifts, so now we got officers working alone. I'm sure that's why many of these officers are here tonight.
That's
But I
absolutely
don't, I
right.
don't have control over that. So, when we did this current budget, the number dropped even more, but the same department, and I'm not picking on DPW, Gary, because I'm sure you guys need that money. Their numbers went to 56,000.
But do you have the numbers for 14-15?
I don't have those numbers.
Okay. Have we seen this before for last year's budget?
What, that chart?
Yeah.
No.
See, that's,
But-
and
but-
what, before we go any further, just so we understand, this chart was not presented to us for the last 2 years during budget
No,
period.
you got that copy before. This was when you first, when it was set at 33, I had to go create this chart. I mean, there's no way that I can stand by and let $33,000 be the
Right,
mark.
and this was, but this was not here for last year's budget, and for you to make the statement you're making now, last year, that may have changed things. And we may have said, this is what we need, but it wasn't made, that's what I'm saying.
But I brought up the same point
This-
when we did this current fiscal year. I said $28,000 is not gonna cut it.
But you didn't give the board information, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, you know what, whatever, the board has it now.
That's right.
The board has it now.
That's right,
But
we
I
have
did
it
tell
now.
the board. Now, I might not have set up and gave this chart out at last year's, I'll have to go watch the tape, but I know that the 28,950 amount that was set was below the 33, which did not work. Did not work at all.
Okay.
So, I bring that up because I keep hearing that we're out of money, we went way over the overtime rate. Of course we did, because that's not the actual number. To me, that's an artificial number that was set. It's not, there's no rhyme or reason for it.
Well, that's.
Especially when you're using another department.
That's not accurate.
You're
You-
using another
That's not
department
accurate.
and saying, oh, you'll get 56,000 for overtime, when their budget's smaller than mine.
So you don't believe that if we
What
had
department is
more
56,000
part-timers
for overtime?
to cover shifts, that would,
45 for
excuse me,
showing
excuse
more.
me,
And then
I'm
another
talking, right, hold on.
11 for maintenance.
Hold on. You don't believe that if we have more part-timers working, that would lower our
No.
overtime number?
I've hired 30 employees since I took over, 19 that are currently still on the roster. We got more part-timers on the roster than we've ever had. And you know what? I'm not picking on part-time officers. Part-time officers have the luxury of calling out whenever they please. Why? Because they have full-time jobs. So what gets priority? I'm not picking on them. They have to say, hey, I can't make it in, I gotta work my other job. They have unlimited amounts of times they can do this. Full-timers have 12 sick days, so they can call out 12 times. Part-timer can say, I'm out, I'm out, I'm out. So I can have more part-timers, it's just,
So
It's
we
not
need to
gonna
adjust
fit
our
the number.
contract then and make sure that we hold the part-timers
Mr.
more
Mayor, you're
accountable.
right. Unfortunately, we can't just do that tonight, sitting here talking.
I
about
mean,
this
well, we
table.
need to
So
come up with some
Absolutely.
solutions as
And
well.
we can talk about that, not in this setting, but yes, that is something that needs to be dealt with. I agree.
Okay.
So, with that current 28,950, of course, right now, on paper, it looks like we're way over. But when you look at my overall numbers from the previous year, total, with me asking for 65,000 on my sheet, that's gonna be needed for overtime, the total amount I asked for was 931,000. So we put $28,000, you're not gonna get 65,000, you're gonna get 28,000, okay, fine. So I asked for 931, that includes my 65 number. You know what the board adopted? 942,000. But you locked me in at 28,950 just for overtime, it just doesn't make sense.
What did we give you?
Well, you certainly did, let me put even numbers. I asked for $1 million, that's soup to nuts, overtime and everything. But I need 100,000 for overtime, right? Somebody says, no, we're only gonna give you 50,000. All right, so then I should be adopting $950,000 overall. But that's not what happened. You cut it, but then you gave me $1,000,001.
Why? What was it
I
spent
don't know.
on, Ken? You don't know what it was spent on? The
It
budget?
wasn't spent, that's what the budget was adopted.
Where did we give you money you didn't ask for, is my question. You're making a statement, I don't have that number right in front of me, you're making a statement that we gave you a lot of additional money you didn't ask for.
I gave you 10 more grand than I asked
Where,
for.
where did we give that to you?
Give me 1 second.
Now, what do you guys have to say? What do you think is a reasonable threshold?
I'm gonna have to break it down line by line, I'm not sure where it came from. It
All
just
right.
alarmed me that there was more there than what I had asked for.
I understand, but when you make those statements, particularly in the forum, you need to know what numbers we're talking about. You're making a statement of a number that's not in front of us. To be able to just say this number and that number, I believe you, but you don't know where the money was spent. That's your budget, again, that's what I'm trying to say. If you're gonna make a statement about your budget, you need to know
It's not-
where that money
Not
is.
what was spent, it was what was approved.
Right, and I'm asking you where that was. You're saying there was additional money approved. Where was it?
I don't know. All I know is 65,000 in that amount is what I needed for overtime.
Okay. We have your proposal for that. Do you have anything else on that before we move on to on-street parking?
Well, I wanna elaborate on, so I'm thinking about, I'm looking at whether somebody wants to believe this chart or not. I look at the overtime numbers going down, realistically going down. So then it made me start thinking, well, what's on the revenue side of the house? So I went back to 2010, 11, and the amount that was budgeted for police revenue, that includes fines, meters and all that, was $40,000. That year, the actual revenues was only $37,717, so it was in the red. So the following year, the board took the appropriate move and reduced that $40,000 to $35,000. That was 11-12. Well, the police department then brought in $49,699.45. That's an increase of, that was in the black, 14,000 and change. That's beautiful. 2012-13, the board said, man, we made more money, let's raise our revenues up, 39,000. Well, that same year, the police department brought in $58,805, $19,000 more. Here's where it gets interesting, because in 2013-14, 39,000 was budgeted for possible revenues again. The police department brought in $115,132. That was a $76,000 increase. So I'm seeing a good thing here. Not using the $33,000 number.
How did you hire forces?
Overtime coming down, revenues going up.
But again, Ken, revenues are going up phenomenal. As the department head, it helps the board to know what accounted for those increases. Meters, tickets, what? Where did we do that? And if we don't do it again, why weren't we doing what we did before to meet those revenues? I commend you, and I never was given the number. That year, that was phenomenal. I heard about a year and a half after the actual fact. When that happens, the board needs to get that information then of record year, we did this. A chart would have been great. The chart you made up here would have been great for revenues for the board to show what the police are doing. Because uninformed, we wouldn't know that there was any increase. And I didn't. Till a year after the phenomenal increase that happened, that's when, in fact, when we went to, the overtime issue came up. That's when I was told that, I don't understand, these guys did phenomenal here. First time heard it. This is what I'm talking about. And when you're tracking $120,000 and the huge increase, why? An opinion helps, let alone actual facts. I think it happened because of this. Continue with the years.
All right, and I don't have 2014-15. All I have that was currently available was the amount that was budgeted, and that was increased to 58,000.
Well, there was an alarming something that came from our auditors. And that was
That was the meters, parking meters.
Right.
They're questioning why the parking meter revenue dropped dramatically last year. And,
My argument's always been, when we start, there's a couple reasons, and one of them is we don't enforce the meters during lunch hour, the busiest time for the meters.
we enforced it prior to that?
Always. So that's one reason. The other reason is because we really need an individual person, and I budget for it every year, and we don't fill it. We need a meter person. But I'm always told that we're not gonna fill it. If you had somebody that managed these meters, and if you kept up the meters, people would use them. They'd be functioning, we'd have steady enforcement on them,
and it didn't last.
Okay.
so.
What else you have?
Are we gonna move office salaries now for police?
No, we're doing salaries and we're doing on-street parking now, right?
Yeah, no, look, the police department gave us salary proposal. The board's
Okay.
gonna have to discuss what you think is the
Right.
appropriate methodology. Now, you certainly can factor in the 207C in that calculation, because that is
Right.
something that can't be helped.
Do we get any monies from workers' comp? Since 2012, have we gotten anything from workers' comp?
Small. Nothing to make up for the
Oh,
cost
We're
of
going
it.
to do on-street parking.
Can you send me those figures? I'll send you an email, just,
Yeah,
Ken, have you put in for a meeting for us this year?
yes, sir.
Where is that?
That's gonna be on either on-street
Okay.
or traffic control.
Let's see here.
Hold on, Bob, let me get caught up here, because I got a mess.
Yeah, it's on street parking.
There you go. Oh, thank you, Charlie.
Okay, so it's the park 20 hours a week, that's it?
So we're gonna do on-street parking?
Yes.
Okay. So, each year I put a traffic enforcement officer, so that's the numbers that we came up with, 20 hours a week, 47 weeks, because we don't have the meters in operation in December. And then everything else, there's just minimal increases, and nothing's really changed, but just factoring in a little bit of increase for just the cost of the products. That's the batteries for the parking meters, the keys, the tools, the machine to repair them, if needed, the parking tickets, and then the meter housings. I haven't bought any meter housings in the last couple years because I was told not to. But we still budget for them.
So it's only like $500.
Yeah, yes.
We're talking about changing those meters around, like 2 on the one post at one point in time.
This area.
Yeah, just on the south end here. Is that something that we're still talking, I don't remember that conversation. Yeah. That would certainly be easier for collections also, wouldn't it? 2 on one,
Well, that, I guess, but we
It's
still
gonna
gotta,
add some confusion with parking.
I was just gonna mention that.
Still, well, one thing is that I think you need to look at before you do that, the parking meter post is lined up with the line for the parking space.
right?
If you eliminate the meter post, it also becomes harder to judge where your car is, it's just a point to look at. I know the reason for going this is to eliminate some of the posts to make Main Street look cleaner, but a lot of times we do something that's positive and then there's a negative to it. So I just think it's something that all those board members might want to look at and research.
I know Cold Springs is thinking, they're tentatively got a plan in for debit cards or, you know. Pricing. Yeah, they're real expensive. I think that they're.
It's just like changing the meters when you went from turning that knob to the electric ones. It's a positive and then there's the negative.
Yeah,
There's a big price difference.
incredible, yeah.
What I'd like to do is, one, is fill that meter maid's position, but also just work on making those things look right. I wanna get them uniform, all the same height, newer heads, have them rotated the same so they just look uniform. I think if we just did that, that would be a big improvement. And then just the upkeep on them, if we had someone to consistently enforce them and maintain them, you'd have less meters down at any given time. It's almost impossible to keep up with it with 2 patrol officers when they have so many other functions that they're doing. And then in their spare time, I guess you can say, they're trying to keep up with these meters. I think they do a decent job for.
Does this 20 hours include like collections and repairs and tickets, actual tickets?
You can fluctuate, you can come in and work an 8-hour days. You know, we would hold them at 20 hours a week though.
What else we got?
So we just covered on-street parking, so I know you said that was for a second, if you guys want to move to traffic control.
Yep.
Again, very short sheet, I wish they were all like this. The crossing guard, there's minimal change there.
Although the hours change.
Yeah, because I miscalculated, it's 180 school days, and when I did the formula before, you gotta understand that some of the stuff, when I took over, it's just, it's what I had, so each year I get, you know, my eyes get a little sharper, I guess, my pen gets a little sharper, my pencil, and I'm able to identify areas where we might be weak, and demonstrate that every year.
So it's 180 days, right?
Yeah, yes. And before that, I do not believe that 180 days is factored in.
And then previously it had been 13.04 per hour, and now it's 13.80.
Yeah, but I got the current rates and that last year's numbers weren't accurate. Another thing, I just, you know, going off the base of what was provided. We're trying to get everything down to the county. Any questions on track?
contractual? The drop, the $4,500 drop in contractual for traffic control?
Oh, yes, the line painting, remember, we took that out, and I was so happy.
Okay.
Feel free to give more stuff to the DPW, Gary, you weren't here for that one. So we wanna make sure that that's included in DPW.
Better adjust my budget.
Or you can put it back in mine and I'll be squared, I'll be even from last year. Remember I said it was 4,000 overall, less than last year's? Maybe that's why, I don't know.
Don't we have contractors who do that? Remember when I asked you if we could
Yeah.
use them at
Yeah.
school? Okay.
They do, but it costs. It's just like a contract for grass cutting, it still comes out of the DPW. Is that it, Ken?
Yes, sir.
Do me a favor, stick around for exec.
Here you
Oh, exec, yeah. Garrett, what
Sir.
do you got?
Oh. You asked me to look into the, we talked about the street sweeper. You asked me to look into rental.
Hmm.
In 2.5 years at a rental rate that they have, we could have bought the machine. It's gonna be a couple more days before he gets back to me with numbers on a lease, if we wanted to look at that. So rental is definitely not one of our options.
You mean rental to have it every day, or rental to have it like once a week?
That's a monthly rental.
Okay.
So what do you think about,
Basically, don't
three
rent
months in the
it for a
summer?
day.
Right.
3 months in the summer or something like that you're thinking about? Is
No,
that-
that's for the year,
You're gonna rent it for the whole year? Okay.
because we do sweeping, and a year like this at the sweepers run, you would've used it almost all year. You could've used it this week,
Okay.
and we do water leaks all year long.
Okay, it's gonna locate the vacuum cleaner.
I did look, I called about a second brand, which I'm not as in favor of, and it was actually 35,000 more than the Johnston like we have now. All right. The other thing I talked to the village clerk about was the cleanup at the senior center, and I feel that we can take care of that. The buildings, for the use of the building, there's the cleanliness there, the way the people are to use it, we can handle that Friday mornings. So we don't feel that the board needs to hire a
Thank you.
cleanup crew for there. All right? The other thing is, I got a quick note from the clerk today about Havens Road and the cell tower. I'd like somebody to point out where you think the location would be to me.
They haven't contacted you?
First I heard about it was.
Okay,
today.
Homeland's gonna contact you and go over things.
Okay. The other thing he mentioned was the wall at 48 Row Avenue. I have a copy of the gentleman's survey, and the wall is right on the line. But that wall is only about 2.5 feet from the road, and if something's not done with it rapidly, we're gonna wind up losing the side of the pavement. We had a situation like that up on South Street some years ago.
Is the wall his wall or our wall?
It's right on the line for his survey. You know, if it is,
Which side of the line?
Well, you know, I don't,
Well, that's, it supports our road there, because that's pretty, what, about 8 foot high?
yeah.
All right, so make a determination whether we can, if it even will be involved in the larger project we're hoping to have within the year, so that, do we do a quick fix?
We can't-
Or do we have to fix it totally?
You can't, the reason this wall failed is because of waiting the 7 years trying to get this funding. This
Oh, yeah,
is
no, no.
This is what happened.
Right, no, we're fixing it.
And.
Can we fix it temporarily and fully fix it under the larger number? Or do we fix it entirely now? That's all I'm
No, it has to
asking.
be repaired now,
Okay,
the way it should be done, the laid up stone here.
Well,
But
all right.
Are we doing it? That's
Well,
my
that's
question.
a good question, only because
Yes.
there's about 5 or 6 houses right down the street that have the same exact issue. The wall supports the road there, from Dr. Pete all the way down, I think.
We did do a section at Dr. Peach years ago and put in a catch basin
Right,
in the wall.
at the bottom.
We did a section of his wall right there, right across from Anthony's house. And the failure of this wall is a direct result, actually, of the lack of the road repair.
Yeah.
The fact that this project
Yes.
occurred, we never got done.
Is the failing at the bottom of the wall?
Because it's
It's a
working
dry
out.
wall, Gary, or is it all?
No, it's concrete.
It's concrete, I thought it was big stones. and-
Gary, can you do it?
Sure.
Done. Thank you so much.
Okay. And the last thing I haven't yet to make a decision, that leaving the, right away, leaving the senior center, there's a huge tree there.
Okay,
It's in the right of way,
right. Going out onto Drew,
yes,
on the left-hand side heading out,
yes.
okay.
The right of way is a right of way that's not owned by anybody.
It's right, that's the senior's driveway technically, isn't it?
Well, it's not part of our property either, according to our survey. It's just a right of way. Whenever they divided the land, that didn't become part of Bill Coffey's property, which is Joey Kamaski now,
Right.
or the people on the other side, who I went up to talk to them tonight just to see how they felt about the tree. This right of way, and then back and across the back of the properties on Drew, is just a right of way. It's on nobody's deed. I went and checked the maps at the town hall with Bruce. It's just an open right of way. Neither
So
property.
it's not ours.
It's not
By
anybody's.
default.
Done.
It's not
Counties.
anybody's, but that tree's gotta come down.
Is it in trouble?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's in
I-
trouble. There's
I know it's
branches
huge.
falling off of it. It's huge.
Right.
Can we take it down even though it's not anyone's?
Well, if it's on the right
I'm
of
not an
way.
attorney.
Yeah.
That's what I'm.
All right, so let's get it to at least,
Yeah, let her.
make sure that it's legal, some, make sure, you know,
It is a right
and then
of
Gary,
way.
figure out how we're taking it down.
I can
Or
get
pray
prices. The only thing I can tell you is, it may not be our property, but if it falls,
Mhm.
It's on-
That's
That's our problem.
Is it a crane job for that? Okay.
crane or somebody's got a real crazy guy.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I have a crazy guy who climbs.
Okay, well, he better have some good climbing shoes.
All right, so let's start with the attorney. Make sure it's okay for us to take it down, and then we need to move forward.
Do you have a drawing, do you have a map of that?
Drawing a tree.
You know, with the right of way,
Yes.
that we could provide her with, so maybe even her to help us some info on that?
I do.
Excellent. Is that it, Gary?
Bear with me. Yes.
Excellent.
Is that it? Yeah. That's
Anything
it.
else? I need a motion on going to exec.
Motion to go into exec.
Again,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Just a question, what are we going to executive session for? And does the board plan on taking any official votes after?
It depends on what happens in exec. We're going in for contract and employee discussion.
There won't be any action.
No, I don't think
There's
so.
no votes planned, but
Right.
will one come up?
Most likely
Nothing
not.
planned.
Can I just ask a brief question?
Sure.
I'm not sure where it fits in for the budget, but I'm concerned that when it comes to spending money, taxpayer money on buying equipment or making, hiring people, for the village, you look at the best quality. I'm just curious on why the village is looking to hire two unqualified police officers, one of which is a convicted criminal, and one of which was arrested by this village police department.
That's not just going to be discussed here. That's an executive session discussion. If you want to, no, excuse me. If you want to stay back for exec, that's fine.
If I'm allowed to, sure.
Yes, you can actually.
Stay
Um,
tuned.
Can we all
No,
say?
just the gentleman with the question. I'm not going to deal with rabble rousers. Any other questions? Because just so we understand, this is a budget workshop, not a regular agenda meeting. This is additional. Doesn't include public comment, but this board has no problem if someone had a comment they wanted to make, as we've heard. Is there someone else that would like to say? We have a large group tonight. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Okay, with that, we're going to go into exec. Thank you so much.
If we,
What's that?
if some people want to wait, will you send someone down to let us